In this episode of the podcast, I sit down with Marcos Siqueira. He's the guy behind Light.art. We talk about the crypto and NFT space, and specifically, is it time to get in or is it time to get out?
This is TWiP.
Hey folks, welcome back to another episode of This Week in Photo. I'm your host, Frederick Van Johnson. Today I have the opportunity to have my friend Marcos Siqueira on the hot seat. He is our resident crypto, NFT, all that stuff expert. And I twisted his arm to get him to come on the show to answer some burning questions that a lot of us creatives have around the crypto industry, especially with all this FTX news and the sort of the volatility of the overall market. I thought Marcos would be the perfect person to come on and demystify it all for us and look into his financial crystal ball, though he is not a financial advisor, but to look into his financial crystal ball and kind of give us his perspective on the state of the crypto union. Marcos Siqueira, welcome to the podcast, man. How are you doing?
Hey, Frederick, how are you? Thanks for having me.
No, it's good to have you. Thank you for coming on, man. I think this is a discussion or an interview episode that's been a long time coming. I've known you for, a better part of like 2 years ish or so. We did some projects together. I helped you with the Light.art site, did some interviews over there on crypto and that kind of thing. And through those interactions, I've learned that you're one of those people that seems to always be one block ahead or maybe 4 or 5 blocks ahead of the rest of us in terms of what this industry is, what it means, crypto, NFT, and all that. In fact, you founded a couple of companies around that, Light.art being one of them. So let's start the interview with just an introduction, like your pedigree, bean counting, as it were, and then the transition over into this digital bean counting world. Who is Marcos Siqueira?
Thanks, Frederick, for the opportunity to be here. That's a very big question, obviously, for anybody. But I think, generally, if you were to summarize, I've had a career in finance for a very long time, so almost 2 decades. I worked across different investment banks in Wall Street, and I think at the same time, I was also very much always a techie. So I was doing projects on the side. I spent a couple of years doing a startup in between, some of my banking jobs. Spent some time in San Francisco and Silicon Valley. And I think, ultimately I found a home in the NFT space, basically in 2021. I was sort of early in the year, I started getting involved very much with NFTs. I found that it was very exciting, and probably, you could argue, but probably the main use case of crypto that we have today. Some people would debate me on that, but I think, if you ask me, we found like a real use case of something that people actually, have an impact in the real world, in their real lives. And so I jumped in, left my job in the end of last year, and started a couple of projects, but ultimately settled with Light.art, which is a curated photography platform. And we've been going since about August. And now, I've been working a lot with artists. I've always loved photography. It's been something that I've liked to do. I'm not a professional. I partner with Elisa, who to start this. And we have now over 100 photographers. We have more than that in terms of collectors that are actively, collecting art through the blockchain. And that's sort of the summary of where I am today. We have a lot ahead of us. It's an interesting market right now, to say the least.
Yeah,
but
yeah.
it's an exciting time for those who want to build, and so that's where we are.
So Marcos, the mission statement for Light.art, right? So when you're speaking to a collector or just someone that's even not in the field or one of the artists, what do you say? Like, Light.art is ... question mark.
So we really want to, elevate photography and create art that is universally valuable, in the art, in the eyes of our kind of community collectors and artists, right? So that's basically our mission. We feel that photography is a very important art form that I think is recognized, but oftentimes not as recognized as other types of art in the world of fine art, and we also want to democratize the art collecting experience, which I think has always obviously been very much reserved to the ultra wealthy. And I think there's an opportunity with NFTs to bring art collecting to a much bigger audience. And we've already seen that happening, and I think it's going to only get bigger over time.
Yeah, no, I agree. And that's a good segue, right? So the overtime question, and a lot of people are like, what does overtime mean? Is that like what are the tick marks on the crypto NFT calendar? Are they in weeks? Are they in months, decades, years? How long are we waiting? We're going to talk about this current sort of thing going on and everything with FTX, but like, what if you're long in crypto, to put a finer point on the question, if you're long in crypto, meaning you're not looking at the day-to-day volatility, what does volatility look like for someone who's long? Are we looking for peaks over years or decades?
Yeah, I mean, I think volatility question is a question about price, right?
Yeah.
And I think I'm not when we're thinking about building, we're not necessarily thinking about price. We're thinking about value, which those two things can vary quite a bit, right? I think if you think about um, looking at fundamentally, are we creating value? I think we are. I see it every day. I mean, we just had this big event in Miami. Obviously, Art Basel was there this weekend. A lot of people were down there. We had a big display, right? And I just see like the collectors and the artists connecting, and they are, enjoying, the art that they're collecting. I think the artists are able to find an outlet for their art, another medium, another channel. And I think all of that stuff is really real, and it's sort of fundamentally real, right? It's not speculation. It's nothing to do with price. It's just, are we creating value for people? And I think the answer is yes. And I think the answer is today, right? We're not talking about the future. We're not talking about 5 years from now. We're talking about today. I think the difference between today and 5 years from today is basically, can we bring that experience to more people, right? And I think the answer is yes. I don't think this is kind of a niche thing. I think a lot of what we're doing is universal. And so that makes me very bullish in the space, if you will, in the NFT space, particularly as it pertains to art.
Yeah, that's interesting. I want to talk about that, the sort of valuation piece of it. It was, for example, in the early days of NFT, when all the buzz was just happening a couple of years ago, even as recently as last year and this year, but we were seeing a lot of digital artwork be sold at just these crazy prices, right? Millions of dollars in some case for something that was expressed in a couple of pixels, or even hundreds of thousands or thousands or, hundreds even for a couple of pixels, and the part of I think a lot of the chasm that people have to jump over is, okay, what does that mean? I could screenshot that. Does that mean I have $1 million now? That kind of thing, and that sort of idea. So I wanted to, I don't want to dive into the whole world of blockchain and NFT from a technology standpoint, but I want to talk about it from just the perception standpoint. And was that sort of big spotlight that was shown on all this stuff at the beginning, did that hinder us to where we are now? Is that driving consumer confidence or lack of consumer confidence?
So I think I'll approach that in two ways, right? So first is,
Yep.
were those prices excessive, right? By the way, there's still a lot of big sales going on right now, right? We just had, I think probably every week we have, easily, almost every day we have like, six digit NFT sales, right? In different collections, and a lot of artists are doing well. So I think we have, big collections, or so let's say valuable collections that trade with a somewhat regular basis, right? So it's not like, okay, there was a one-off that was $1 million. No, there's a lot of let's say still perceived value in a lot of collections, in a lot of art. So that has not necessarily gone away, and I think it won't go away, right? So I think that's a baseline. Now, if you look at, okay, did we have some excesses? I think maybe we still have some excesses on certain projects, possibly. And I think the answer to that is, as I said, price is very different from value, and price can differ from value for a very long time, right? Having been in finance, that sometimes there's a way to discover where the value is. You think people thought, Tesla was going to blow up. It was a scam. Hedge funds decided to short it, right? Because they thought the price was ridiculous. And then other people thought, no, this is not, this is a company that's going to change, the way we drive. And so there's that sort of bull versus bear, and, prices can go wildly in different directions. And in the end of the day, the fundamentals tend to kind of, have a way of coming out and evening out things over time, right? And it's no different here. So I think, for me, this last year has been in some way validating, just to see that, if you focus on things that I think have fundamental value, they will last, right? And we see a lot now in the NFT space, some projects that had real artists with a real relevance, with something to say, or projects that were with the proper that was really focused on fundamental value rather than hype. Those teams are still around, they're still working, and they're still doing interesting things, and in some cases the prices have even gone up for some of those projects, right? So we can't sort of generalize. Now, having a bit of a washout, and having some people kind of go away and some projects fail, and it is very painful for a lot of people. And I think that is something that obviously turns people off. But again, if you're in any space, whether it's stocks or real estate or NFTs or even kind of non-financial things, I think the fundamental things that bring value to everyone are still there, right? And so that's what I would say.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. I think you and I may have talked about this before, but just this sort of shake up being a shakeout in a lot of ways, of people that are sort of bullish and in it and talented and sort of in the space are going to be the ones that hang on, right? And the ones that aren't really in it, or for whatever reasons can't stay in the space, those are the ones that are falling off. Is that good though? Do you think that sort of shaking out is good, or is it stifling some of the artists, looking from an artist standpoint, not an investor or collector, but from an artist that is just getting into the space and like, oh wow, all this stuff happened just that I'm getting in. They're more likely to bounce off and be a detractor for the crypto space versus a proponent, right?
Yeah, no, I think, look, good or bad, I don't want to say good or bad. It is what it is, right? Like,
Yeah.
I think,
Yeah.
unfortunately or fortunately, history does not go in a nice linear slope upwards, right? Like, things kind of go up and down, and we learn as we go along. I think in crypto, there's definitely a lot of learning that's happened over the years, right? And I think there's a big learning moment right now, and I think the question is, what are we going to learn from it, right? If we think, it was just some individual bad actors, I think that's one approach, and there's definitely some of that, but there's also some fundamental things that need to be looked at, and so I think it's important to look at how we're going to improve the system as a whole, So around transparency, I think one of the lessons, for example, is, we trust a lot of decentralized entities, like exchanges, and those exchanges were not worthy of the trust that they received, right? So something needs to be done about that, right? So either you have to increase trust in those entities, that's a more centralized approach, or you have to take more decentralized approach, which is also very much a crypto ethos type of approach, where a lot of financial transactions in crypto can be done through decentralized finance, which don't involve trusting someone like who's running an exchange or a centralized party, right? And those type of systems and have actually held up and continue to operate pretty well throughout this process, throughout this bear market, right? So
Can you
there's a lot to be
demystify that? Demystify that for us. And one of the questions on my list to ask you is to break down from a sort of elementary school or to an elementary school level, this whole FTX thing, right? And from the standpoint of, I would argue that a lot of people just look at that and they saw the news go by and they're like, oh, FTX, never heard of that. Oh, crap, that guy lost a lot of money. Oh, a lot of people lost a lot of money. That's crypto. Crypto bad. Next, right? So, can you put a finer point on that and just sort of what happened with that piece? Without any conjecture or opinions in it, just like what happened, what went wrong with that, and is it going to happen again type thing?
I think, I mean, look, there's a lot of information still coming out, and I don't want to be very specific on details because there are court cases and everything, and I don't know all the details. But generally speaking, the accepted storyline based on the information that we have is that FTX, which was the second largest exchange, was being run a little bit like a bank, i.e., they would take people's money and then use that money to lend it out, right? Which, usually if you're an exchange, you have client assets, you have to keep it, right? And not only they were lending it out, one of the big creditors was, the founder's own investment fund, which was, basically punting on, making different trading strategies, if you will, that hadn't gone, not so well, right? So they lost a bunch of money through their fund, which was essentially client money, if you want to kind of be very blunt about it. And as a result, people who had money with that exchange ended up losing a lot of their money. We don't know how much will be recovered, but it's probably going to be cents on the dollar, right? And so I think, again, going back to this idea of trust, there was a huge trust in this particular entity. People put their money there, like you trust your bank or you trust your brokerage account, Charles Schwab or whatever, that your money's there and it's safe, but it wasn't, right? And
that was the whole idea, right? Isn't that whole idea of crypto and just of the whole space is the decentralization, right? And not having a bank entity in charge of everything. You can see every transaction and the whole trail is etched permanently into the blockchain, and there's just inherent transparency in the whole space. But then you have these exchanges, which, as we've learned, aren't necessarily transparent, right? So how does that balance out?
Yeah, I think, if you had your crypto in your own wallet, which was we call it self-custody, you have your own private keys, your own password, if you will, for the blockchain, and you have that, nothing happened to your funds, right? You're completely fine. Of course, there may have been some mark-to-market losses. I mean, price of some of your crypto might have gone down in US dollar terms, but you didn't have your money disappear, right? Yeah. And so that is sort of what I was saying earlier. Like, there's a lesson about also the benefits of decentralization in a situation like this. Now, I'm not one of those people that thinks that everything has to be decentralized, because I think it's very difficult to create a system that there is no certain points of some amount of centralization. But if there are those points of centralization, and today those are often exchanges, then you need to regulate that, right? And I think that's how we create trust in the real financial world, right? You have good regulations that prevent people from doing stuff like that, or there's more transparency. So the regulation around these are the kind of things you have to disclose, right? And I think there's a lot of a certain amount of self-policing we can do, right? Making sure we ask exchanges to provide blockchain records, for example, of how much reserves they have and all that. But you still at some point might need some amount of regulation to take place as well. So I'm not opposed to that. I don't think the regulators are up to speed with what's going on in crypto, so that may take some time to really get to a point like that, right? So generally, I'll say
they need. I'm sorry. Yeah, go ahead and finish your thought, sir.
No, just to say, so there's an on-ramp that happens when you come in from cash, from fiat, right? So from US dollars to buying your crypto. That usually happens through an exchange, which is a regulated, centralized entity. But then once you move your money into crypto and you're into the decentralized world, it's a bit of a different ballgame. It's different types of risks that you have, right? So you're not gonna have a risk somebody running away with your cash from an exchange standpoint, but you may be have other issues around your own self, because you make sure you don't lose your private key, your password, if you will, right? Which for some people that's a concern.
I wonder, introducing regulation into the space, how is that going to work? Because I think of crypto as, or just the whole space as almost like I'm in Silicon Valley, right? Ostensibly. So it's the .com, fast moving, fast decisions, fast mistakes, fast failure, fast successes, right? Everything's fast. Well, I think government, i.e. regulation, I think the opposite. Right, I think slow to make silly decisions. It takes forever, and they're never up to speed on the latest technologies. I mean, look at when the Obama website rolled out. Right, it didn't work. It was like merging government and technology, and something as simple as a website. And, although it was a complex website dealing with healthcare, still didn't work. Right, if you got all the money in the world, it seems like you could make something like that work. So I'm wondering, like with this thing, if we introduce and open the kimono to government, say, yeah, we need regulation, give us a lattice work to grow on. A, will they be fast enough to do that? And B, have the wherewithal to stay on top of it, right? Because it's not like, okay, this is the way things are in 2022, 23, and it's going to be like that for the next 10 years. This stuff, the whole thing could switch up in 2 years or a year. And can government turn on a dime like that, especially with these numbers and these fortunes tied to it? I don't know. What's your take on that?
Well, that's a very philosophical question, Frederick. What's the role of government, right?
Yeah.
You're putting me in a tough spot politically here. I don't look. I'll say two things, right? So first is it's a bit of a feature, not a bug. The government is conservative and slow, right? Meaning, we want entrepreneurs to be taking risks and going out there and doing things. And sometimes we don't necessarily want our government to be out there taking crazy risks, right? And doing things fast. There are situations where we would want that more, and we want more, let's say, flexibility, and we would want government to be more nimble and faster, right? I think, especially given the pace of change in technology, I think the pendulum is probably on the side of maybe government is a bit slow today, right? So it'll be good to have better regulators, faster regulators, so more adaptable, et cetera, right? But then, usually regulation is just a small part of enforcing legislation, right? And we know legislation can be very slow, right? If we know how Congress works and we know how kind of politics works. And then also that's, again, somewhat a feature rather than a bug in some ways, right? So I think that's one thing. The other is, look, there are certain principles of things that we know we want to regulate, right? So when somebody's going to take a bunch of people's money, it's probably a good idea to have somebody else have an overlook over that, right? So as bad as FTX was, and not just FTX, and we had Luna, we had Celsius, we had a few other cases, in this bear market. As bad as those situations were, crypto has remained relatively insulated to like the more macro environment, right? So when Lehman Brothers or Bear Stearns, they went down, it actually really hurt the livelihood of like millions of people, right? Not just in the United States, but across the world, right? Whereas, FTX going down, it's ruining the livelihood of people who had money with them, but there was no kind of macroeconomic, let's say, spillover effect, i.e. like FTX was not too big to fail, if you will, right?
Yeah.
But you could see a future where if crypto gets bigger, it starts having an impact on a more macro level, right? And then that's when you really want to make sure that it's safer, and there's no centralized or too big entity that could have that impact in the rest of the economy, right? Today we're not to that point yet. So
before we started recording, I gave you kind of 3 avatars that I wanted to touch on and get your advice on, right? So in terms of timing. So there's the person, let's say the photographer, that is considering, hey, I'm a great photographer. I've been doing this for years. I want to get into this crypto space for all the obvious reasons, right? So there's that person. There's the new person that is just sort of looking at the space and like, oh, that's interesting, but I'm scared, right? Because all this other stuff is going on. Then there's the investors that are looking to put money into the space and seeing volatility and kind of like, whoa, is now time to buy, or should I hold, or should I run? front, that kind of thing. Again, you're not a financial advisor, and this is not financial advice, but for those people, especially speaking to the photographers and the creatives specifically that are looking at the space and like, holy hell, this is, I want to get in. This looks like a dream for me to get my work out in the community and, maybe make a couple of quarters on it as well. But, is now the time to do it. What do you say to both the photographer and the collector who's kind of sitting on the sidelines, scratching their heads and worried about jumping in right now, being short or long? What do you think?
Yeah, again, I go back to this question of like, fundamentals, right? So what are the fundamental things here? People also often think, oh, it's just like a copy of a JPEG that I can copy everywhere, right? Well, that's not really what it is about, right? What it is about is sort of having that certificate of ownership of something authentic, from an artist, right? And I think if you're gonna make an NFT out of a piece of art, you're sort of should be thinking of it as I'm creating an asset for someone, right? So if you're something that someone will value, either they'll value because they love it, because it's beautiful. Generally, I think art hits on the emotional side, right? So it has an emotional component to it. Someone would want to own it, right?
Yeah.
And also there's maybe something really an important story that you want to tell, right? And all of that comes into play into saying, look, I'm going to create something that is going to be of value to someone, right? And likewise, if you're the collector, it's like, well, if this has value to me, that might be enough. But also, if it has value to me, it might have value to other people in the future, and it becomes something that is valuable over time, right? I'm not talking about financial investments. I'm talking about art, right? People do buy art today as a way to kind of, store value, right, for the future. Of course, not a lot of art has that property, but increasingly we can have more art have that property because of NFT, right?
Mm-hmm.
So to the photographer or to the artist, I would say, use this as a way to monetize, if you will, something that you're creating that has value, right? Has value to you, and you think will have value for other people. And I mean, that's a pretty basic kind of principle, right? And the value doesn't have to be, some gimmick or, oh, if you buy my art, I don't know, I'll give you a workshop or whatever. That some people have done that, but it's just more, in my view, like intrinsically, like why is this valuable to someone, right? And then as a collector, buy what you can afford. And if you're thinking of crypto in general, not just NFTs, as a potential kind of asset to hold in your portfolio, keep it at a percentage that you think it's reasonable, right? That you can afford. Meaning that it shouldn't be all of your portfolio. You should be diversifying, right? Just like any other financial instrument that you have or any other exposure that you have. Some amount is reasonable. It's actually probably not reasonable to have zero, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that's sort of my general kind of take on that. And today, prices have come down, so a lot of people who had a big percentage of their portfolio in crypto now have a smaller percentage. They might be rebalancing, right? But at the same time, the price of a lot of other things have come down. Whether it's stocks or bonds or even baseball card collectibles or watches. I mean, I talk to people in the collectible world too, and they're probably down even more than crypto collectibles at the moment. And people are not talking about that as being like a scam or a problem or whatever, right? It's just it is what it is. Like the things are down today because there's less liquidity in the market, and and it's just there's a temporary effect here at play generally for markets overall.
Yeah, yeah, very well said. That's perfect. Thank you. Perfect. Let's talk about the Light.art project that you're working on, that I helped you work on, and Elia Lacardi's involved in, and a bunch of my friends are part of the artists that you have in there. And you defined what it was, but there are some very specific things that you are doing over there in terms of your methodology around curation You're doing specific single artist drops for very specific reasons. Can you talk about some of the projects that you have going on?
Sure. Yeah. Actually, let me start with the curation since you brought that up. So we believe that, going back to this idea of how do we ensure that there is value in the NFTs that we are issuing, they're creating, for artists. One of them is, we have a curation board that has 10 people. So it's a rotating roster of collectors and photographers. So at the moment we have 5 of each. And I think that's a good balance. The idea being that, often the value of art is subjective, but having a panel of people looking at it really helps us. And here in your screen, you can see the different people in the curation board. So we got people like Elia Locardi, Albert Droz, Renee Robin. So there's photographer Omar Robles, so number of photographers. And then we have collectors from the crypto space, people like NorCal Guy, which is a huge photography collector, Pharaoh Punk, and so on. Claire Silver is actually an artist, an AI artist, but she's also been in crypto for a very long time as a collector as well. We have this board that really helps us make those decisions and screen, I think, the work that we think makes the most sense for our community, and I mean our community broadly, meaning collectors and artists. So we want to make sure that we have collections that people are proud of, right? So that's on the curation side. Now, what do we do with that? So we have 3 different streams of collections that we issue, right? That we publish. So the first is we have an annual drop. The idea with the annual drop is, which is this alpha collection, was the first one for 2022, was creating a collection that kind of captured, a bit of the current state in the NFT world. So we have 100 artists. There are different types of photography represented, from conceptual to landscape to wildlife to portrait, street, underwater, right? So you have a whole gamut. And some of these artists are already very established in NFTs. Other have never minted an NFT before, right? Which is sort of reflection a little bit where we are in that space, right? Some people coming in, some people already there, and it's sort of a celebration of kind of where we are. And I think we hope that with every year we'll do a different collection, and over time you'll be able to look at these photos that are permanently in the blockchain as sort of almost like a recorded history of NFT photography that people can look back into. So that's the annual series, the annual collection. Then beyond that, we have a curated series, which is individual artists. So here you have our first one that is just about to launch, from Elisa Yanacone. So she has a collection here called The Spiral of Containment, Rape's Aftermath, which is a collection around expressing trauma through art. Oh, there it is on the site. Yeah, which is she is a rape survivor herself, and she talked to several other rape survivors and worked with them to create these images. And we wanted to have this as a curator, because we thought it is very relevant. Obviously, for the moment, it's a very important message. And obviously, Elisa is a great artist, and the photos are fantastic. So it's just kind of picking and choosing specific collections that we think are relevant and important, that people will want to collect and support. And so that was the first one that we chose, and we're going to be doing those every month with different artists. So if people are listening to this podcast and they want to to potentially do a collection in an NFT format with us, there will be opportunities to also apply to do a collection with us. So you can check out our website. And then the third thing that we're doing, that we're calling the Fresh series, and that's sort of a catch-all for experimental things, because we think the world of NFT is going to change a lot, and we want to be trying different things. So the first collection, the Fresh series, is this partnership that we have done with the Mandarin Oriental Palace Hotel in Lucerne, Switzerland. And the idea here is we will make images available to their guests at their digital gallery on site at the hotel, and they'll be able to vote on the images that they think are their favorites, and then that will become a collection for the Mandarin Oriental, and sort of their official collection. So we have people like Marco Grassi, Albert Sine, Pablo Tenore, Enrico Fossati. So the number of also angel folks. Those are the initial kind of photographers. The gallery will run for 2 months, so we may have a few others coming in with iconic images of Switzerland, and then that again becomes a collection. I think this is interesting to me because it again goes back to this idea of, can we democratize our collecting? Can we expand to more people? Instead of being just people who are in NFT already or crypto folks, anybody who's traveling may want to collect art because you visit a place, maybe you buy a print, maybe you buy a painting, maybe you buy just a memento like at the gift shop, right? Well, why not actually buy a piece of digital art in an NFT that you can collect, right? And you can do that by being at the hotel and collecting, and then later becomes an asset that you have, and it's both a memory for you, but also something that is valuable. So
Yeah, yeah, no, killer. That's killer. Congratulations on that, because that's clearly you can see the trajectory, right? Because this one goes, and there are other locations that you could probably do the same idea, do a rinse and repeat, and
yeah, we hope to. Yeah, let's hope so.
Yeah, no, I was gonna say, you remember you mentioned the Elisa piece, and I did the interview for her that's on the site, that's on the blog area of the site, and I did my involvement with the Light.art project was this collection of 20 interviews that we did that are going to be up there, or that are already up there as you listen to this, and one of them was this Elisa interview. That was one of the hardest interviews that I've ever done. She's so easy to talk to, and she made it so easy, but the subject matter was, it was difficult to prepare for and to approach, especially as a guy, right? Going in there and having this conversation, even though there are males in the collection that I found out. But the interesting thing, just to put a little footnote on that piece of it, was the interview was about the collection, and the collection was focused on victims of rape, right? But not from a, this is what happened to me documentary style. It was more from the vision that these survivors have in their head that they think of when they think of the traumatic event. And she interviewed them, or had conversations with them, and drew out what that vision was, that kind of nags them, that keeps coming back. And she illustrated that in photography, which was crazy, right? It was just, just to kind of look into the head of the people through, as translated through an artist like Elisa. It was just, it gave it a whole new dimension for me. And thank you, Elisa, if you're watching this, for making it so easy for me to interview you, because it wasn't easy.
Yeah, and I want to thank Elisa also for joining and doing this drop with us, because we are very lucky to have that collection. As you said, Frederick, it's an absolutely fantastic body of work, and I think uses this idea of Latin American magical realism, right, to actually address human rights issue, which is basically the bread and butter of what Lisa does. And she's a pioneer in that. And I think it's worth watching that podcast or listening to that podcast with her. And you did a fantastic job, Frederick, with her and with all the other guests. But particularly this one was probably one of my favorite episodes. So yeah, I definitely agree with everything you said.
Thank you. Yeah, that was a good one. That's what it's all about, just, and I think what we mentioned that in the interview is the using your powers, your superpowers for good, right? Versus not that taking pictures of pretty landscapes and portraits of beautiful people and all those, that's great, but aiming it, I guess this is kind of the photojournalist in me, like aiming it at something that could literally change someone's perspective on something is huge. And she did that with
yeah,
skill.
absolutely. And she commented on this on the podcast, right? Which is it's fine to have pictures of kittens, right, as NFTs and these in memes and fun things, right? And we all need that, given how heavy loaded the context of the world is today, right? But then when we sort of I think the word you said, when you regain yourself, right, like you can actually start thinking about what are the issues I care about, and can I use NFTs for that? And yeah, it's a great platform for this, and I think it's been underutilized in my view for that kind of cause related or story driven change making type of projects, right? And so we're really happy to have that project and support it. And so I know I still love the fun stuff that we do in NFTs, but we also have to focus on other things and serious things. I think in fact that those should be priority.
Yeah, I definitely agree. Definitely. One of the final questions I wanted to throw at you is mainstream adoption. I think you and I maybe a year or so ago talked about this a little bit. Maybe it was offline, but just the idea of what is mainstream adoption and when is mainstream adoption, i.e., when am I going to be able to walk into a Target with my hardware digital wallet and it just becomes like normal, like using an ATM, or when am I going to be, just buy anything, use it in the wallet on my iPhone, my crypto balance shows up in there and I can use that as a payment method. Is that something that you, as someone that's embedded in this space, want to see happen, or does it come along with baggage? If the more people that get involved, the more it's diluted. I don't know. What do you think?
I think I definitely want to see it happen. We're working towards it, right? So this project, for example, with Mandarin Oriental is part of that. And I think it's already happening, Frederick. I mean, if you look at, you can now buy NFTs on Instagram, right? They started a pilot with, I think, 20 artists. And I mean, just think about what that means, right? Like Instagram with, hundreds of millions, like, even over 1 billion users. What if, a small fraction of that starts collecting art, right? Through an NFT. So we're not talking about years here. We're talking about months, maybe next year, and we're going to start seeing a lot more adoption. There are a lot of things that needed to be resolved that are still being resolved from the user experience standpoint, right? We talked about wallets and private keys and exchanges and all that, right? But today, all of the companies that are reaching consumers are focused on developing Web3 solutions, right? So whether you can buy crypto on your PayPal app or you can buy an NFT on Instagram, right? I don't know yet which one will succeed in bringing in big numbers, but it's a question of next year, in my view. It's not a question of years. So if you're looking in from the outside, be prepared to see a lot more people around you looking at NFTs. That's my take. Now, in terms of what's the downside of mass adoption, if you will, I mean, I think if a lot of people look at these things as speculative, ways to make money and flip and just sort of don't really care about what they're buying. They're just buying because they think the price is going to go up. You might have some disappointment from a lot of people as well, right? So that's why I go back. I think we all need to sort of look back and think about, okay, what are the fundamentals of what I'm buying? Am I buying because I love it? Am I buying because this is valuable art? Or I'm just buying because I think somebody else is going to buy from me for a higher price later.
Yeah. It just goes down to, and the other piece of it is your risk adverseness, if that's a word, right? How much money do you have to spend? Like, what's your budget for Vegas? Like, I'm one of those people that goes in with, I got X dollars. When it's gone, I'm gone, right? Not like, let me get a payday loan so I can. Because I know this is my lucky day. My horoscope said so. I am not that guy. So yeah.
Exactly. For me, that's one aspect of let's talk about what the other aspect is. Like the other aspect is I see collectors and their behavior, right? And what they're doing is they're saying, look, I'm building a collection and here it is, and have a look. And it's like, and they're really thoughtful, right? They thought about, okay, I really like, let's say, black and white minimalist photography, right? So they go and they find different artists and they buy black and white minimalist photography, and then they create a digital gallery and they say, come check out my gallery, and they share it with their friends and they share it with other people, and they become known as sort of like a collector of black and white minimalist photography, or they buy AI art and photography, and they pair them and they say, okay, I have a whole gallery of AI art with photography or generative art or whatever it is, right? Um, and this collectible instinct, if you will, a lot of people collect things. A lot of people love collect. In fact, most people collect something, right? And there's real value to that. There's emotional value that people do that for a reason, that they love it, right? And so forget the speculative thing and budget and thinking of it as gambling. Thinking of it as like, do I love this art? Do I want to support these artists? Do I want to be, a collector that has, a collection that I'm proud of? And today, anyone can do that. It used to be that, you have to be, a multi-billionaire and have your own kind of gallery or whatever to be able to have that experience. Today, it's accessible to all of us.
Yeah, yeah, very well said. Yeah, that's the other side of it, right? And I should know that, right? Having interviewed the artists and the collectors that are involved, and one of the main themes that come out of the collectors that I've spoken with is they're not, for the most part, not in it to like, okay, I'm going to buy this because I'm going to sell it in 2 weeks for this much. They're buying art because they like the art and they genuinely want to own the art. Right, they want to feel like they have ownership, and then and in some cases a relationship or a dialogue at least with the artist that created that art. So that's it versus, okay, what can I drop this for today? What can I, who can I unload this thing on? They're like, this is mine. There are many like it, but this one is mine. Right? So
Yeah, and it's funny because in a way, there is speculation in NFTs, but if you're a real trader, you have coins. Just go play with your coins. There's a liquid, goes up and down. Go have fun. Where with NFTs, yeah, they're a little bit more liquid. And so there's a market, and there should be a market for them. But if you're a pure speculator, it's probably not a place you want to necessarily always
sure.
play in.
Well, Marcos, let's wrap up with future speak, right? So as we record this, we're in the last month, December of 2022. Hello, me from the future, but this is 2022 as we record this. What do you want Light.art to be? And what does, if everything goes the way that you want it to go for the next 12, 24 months, what does Light.art look like at the end of 23 and then into 2024?
Well, so I certainly want people to think of us as like, the name, for photography NFT. So when you think photography and you think NFTs, I would like people to think of Light.art, right? Because we have, really high quality work. We have a good community. We have, basically, serious group of people interested in photography and interested in art, and we are known for that, right? So I think so that's definitely a part of our goal, and I think we're already well into that process, right? So I think in NFT community, people know us. I think a lot of artists, as I said, we have 101 artists now with Elisa, but we're going to have more. People recognize and they come to us. Collectors know us and all that. So I think that's piece one. The second one is in terms of adoption. Like I said, I do want us to spend more time, figuring out how to reach more people. So this collection, the first with the Mandarin, is a part of that. The other part is just getting people to come into our platform. If they connect with the art, to join us. So just growth, right? That's, I guess, a second element. And I think that the third element, we would like to have even more relationships with the traditional photography world. That's been part of our mission from the beginning. What I mean by that, events, that already exist, companies that already exist, and try to like bridge that gap between what's happened already in photography, over time, with what's happening in photography in the NFT space, and I think we're in a good position to do that because we have the photographers who are straddling both worlds, and so we want to be more engaged with the photography community outside of the NFT space even more than we have been in the past year, the
Yeah,
past few
makes
months,
sense.
really. Yeah.
Yeah, it makes sense. How far do you think we're away from a world when in Lightroom or Photoshop I can say export as NFT and have that go into a machine like Light and have all the right things happen, from directly from my image editor or digital asset management app of choice?
I think they've already started playing with that on Adobe, right? So I think, look, we're basically, as I said, I think next year is going to be a huge year for NFT in photography, particularly. So I'm not sure of the details of every single project, but I have seen a few companies and a few projects looking to do exactly that. So I wouldn't be surprised if we're, 12 months from people not even thinking about NFTs as a weird thing anymore.
That's good. That's good. All right. Well, cool. I'll give you the last word, man. So what's the last word on Light.art and the last word on the crypto and NFT space from Marco Siqueira?
As I said, I think, my last word is let's make photography NFTs, work. Let's elevate photography as an art form. I think everybody in your audience is probably, willing to sign up for a mission like that. We are supporters of photographers. I think we can all work together. The NFT space has proven to be very friendly. So I think, I found people have come in from, say, the Instagram world or other pieces. They find that, it's very competitive sometimes, whereas in NFT, it's very welcoming. People are very supportive of each other. So we have an opportunity to sort of reset, the photography community. And I think, what I see is great, so I'd like to invite everybody to have a look at that and, reach out on Twitter. My handle is dappunk. If you want to, get in touch, and we'll see you guys out there in the metaverse.
Awesome. See, we didn't even go into the metaverse stuff. I'm leaving that alone for now. In fact, I got something it's charging right back there that I got to play with on the show. So just the whole idea. For the folks that are listening to the audio, I was pointing to a MetaQuest headset that the older, not the new version, that I'm charging up just to make sure. I turn it on every couple of weeks just to update the software and see what's going on in there, and then it goes back on that show. Marcos Siqueira, thank you, man, for coming on. It's been a long time coming. I want to put you on the hot seat and make you commit to coming on again to the podcast, after some of these other projects that you have launched. I want to know how they're, let the TWiP audience know how things are going, and just a general check-in on the crypto and NFT space from time to time. Are you down for that?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me. Happy to come back. Yeah, would love to. All
right, Marco Siqueira, Light.art is the website. Dappunk, Dapp, Dappunk, right? Dapp, 3 P's in there or 2 P's? Yep. Dappunk.
3 P total, yeah.
3 P's. Dappunk is is his handle in the cryptoverse and the online world. So check him out and connect with him and have conversations. And also comment on this video in the description or the comments below, and throw your likes and all that good stuff in there. I always forget to do that as a YouTuber. Like and subscribe to the podcast. How are you doing that? Like and subscribe. Smash that like button. All right, man. I hate doing that. I'm too old to do that. All right, we'll leave that right there. Too old to be smashing stuff. I don't know. So we'll leave that right there. And Marcos, congratulations on everything you're doing. And a sincere thank you for just all the blood, sweat, and thankless tears that you've put into elevating photographers and helping all the different voices get out there. Because, it's amazing what you're doing. It's amazing to see how motivated you are as an entrepreneur and committed to the space that you are in a good and positive way. So just a personal thank you from me for doing what you do. Keep doing it.
Thank you, Frederick. Thanks for having me. Thanks for saying that. I appreciate it.
No problem. All right, man. You take care. You have a good rest of your day.
This is TWiP.